Hi, and welcome to the Digital Freedom Coach podcast with me, Eric Olson. Here, we go in depth and talk about how you can use digital tools to create more freedom in your life. Are you, as me, curious about how you can work remotely, how you can build a business online, and what it actually takes to create the life of your dreams? Then this is the podcast for you. For more info on what we do, check out thedigitalfreedomcoach.com. So we have a new exciting episode here with the Digital Freedom Coach podcast. And today I'm very grateful because we have another exciting guest here at the podcast. So you, for my dear listener, you won't only hear me babbling like in every episode, right? We also have other guests. And Margaret, Steffie, which I have as a guest today, we never met like physically, like on site, but we've been talking back and forth using like Messenger and social media, right? And I know, Margaret, you're also a Primal health coach, so I think we will talk a bit about that. But I will give you kind of, and for the listeners as well, kind of the summary here. Okay, so Margaret is a health, fitness, and wine coach who helps women at their 20s to skyrocket their confidence through improving their health and increasing their fitness while enjoying wine. Her background in distance running, that's a good thing, has helped her create her marathon to flawless confidence approach. We're not working with clients. Margaret is working on her podcast, The Grapes and Gains radio show, completing her upcoming book, Bad Word, The Freshman 15, Finding Optimal Health Before Chronic Disease Finds You, training for endurance races, which, I like that one, or working on her school work, right? So that's kind of Margaret. And I have kind of tons of questions and all, but I'm kind of curious, like, based on that, kind of where is, like, how did you start? Like, how did you, I know we're going to talk about your business and building and digital tools, but I'm kind of curious, how did you get into building the business you're building, like into your health journey and everything? Maybe you can share a bit.
Yeah. So health journey wise, I was always the overweight kid. It was just kind of the fact of life for me, and overweight, always suffering from an infant with irritable bowel syndrome that was just, in a way, unmanageable at times, problematic, painful, inhibited my daily life at certain points in my life, and both impacted my confidence through life. So it is funny that I now work with confidence, because that wasn't what I thought would be my niche. But it was just definitely something that was always there. And then family wanting to just do what was best for me was always pressing exercise. Don't get me wrong, I love to move and it's great for you, but it was maybe pushed in a way of weight loss and better health, and it just didn't work for me that way. But I was always active. I swam competitively from probably age 10 to 17. And then that's when I transitioned to running, because I found it was a better stress relief for me. So at that point, I started running, didn't really ever stop, haven't stopped. Moved up about 2 years after that to running my first half marathon, or in the US, we have a lot of 10 milers, which I really like as a happy distance. And then from there have pushed and played a little bit with the full marathon, with the hopes of going to Boston. But all of this obviously revolved around my weight, desiring to manage that as well as my IBS, and really having struggles with both my whole life, and practitioners really not being able to get to the root of the problem. They just either tell me to stop, or like drop my calorie count, or exercise more, or with my IBS, just they're like, I can't help you anymore. You're fine. Let's go for a psych consult. It's all in your head. And well, obviously that's just what their scope of practice is. It wasn't getting to my problems. I very much fell on paleo, primal. I kind of don't follow one per se. I just follow all to an extent. It depends on what I need at that point. But I fell into it kind of on accident. I didn't know I was doing it for about 4 months. And then I found the words paleo and primal and was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I really started in a way of, okay, I have realized that, say, eating breads and stuff doesn't agree with my system. So I'll take those out. And then I'm like, oh, well, what about this? And it kind of continued on that path. And then I realized what I was doing.
Okay, cool. And I'm kind of, before you found then kind of primal paleo, like the diet you had, was that kind of traditional? I sometimes I read it's called like the SAD, right? The standard American diet. So kind of bread and grains and vegetable oils. Kind of, was that the diet you had before?
Yep, pretty much.
Okay. And then also, actually, for the listener, or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm a primal health coach myself. You're a primal health coach, but I'm not sure many people are actually, knows what primal is. Maybe what's like your definition of primal, Margaret?
Yeah, so I very much, and it, again, I think primal varies person to person. For me, and for many of the people I work with, it's very much a low processed way of eating, with prioritizing animal protein, good vegetables, some fruits, maybe some dairy thrown in here and there as desired. So really just keeping to that low processed. But I also, for me, at least at this point in my life, and with many clients who've, say, been doing it for a while, it doesn't mean you can't eat the other things every now and again. There's still balance to it all. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you could then maybe get a stomach ache, but that's your choice.
Do you do like 80-20 rule?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't really count per se, but it's probably roughly that. Okay.
So and tell me a bit about like your running. I think we are both runners, so we don't have 10 miles. We count in kilometers. So I guess that would be like 10 kilometers, 10K, but that is less than 10 miles, which would be 16K.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
shorter distances and all. But I believe we share that one. I mean, I love running. I began running after, and I share this like in your podcast, but I love running after, cycling to Spain and all. And then I got back, started skiing, and what can I do? I need to do something. I can run.
Yeah.
I remember, maybe you can relate, like the first few times I did not like it at all. Like it was horrible. I was like running too fast and kind of short distances and kind of more like sprinting, didn't know what I was doing. But instead of just going back home, lying on the couch, watching, television or something, I decided to keep at it. And now I kind of in love with running. I don't know if you can relate, or what's running for you, Margaret? What does it mean?
Yeah, running is definitely an escape. For me, it's something that puts me in touch with nature. It just makes me happy, especially it ebbs and flows like everything with my love for it sometimes, especially if I'm busy doing a million other things. But definitely if I'm out on the trails, dedicated to a certain amount of distance or time out there, just that connection just brings a smile to my face. And I'm maybe sometimes not moving as fast if I'm out on a trail, because I have a tendency, if it's just a more relaxed run, to nature watch. But it's still one of those just magical experiences that I have a just complete love of the running and everything. And everyone's like, why do you do it? Or why are you up at 5 a.m. running? And I'm like, well, why aren't you? Especially I live in a very beautiful area that's full of nature trails, full of just nature in general, and people who want to protect it and be able to view it for years to come. So I will run on this one trail that is directly next to the lake. And so I can, at 5 a.m. in the summers, be out running and watching the sunrise at the same time over the lake. And it's just that beautiful cotton candy sky color. It's just...
So you do that like often, like every day, sometimes like 5 a.m. That's like your thing. You go up and you go for a run.
In the summer, yes. It changes a little bit in the winter, because if I want to go outside, I try to wait for it to be closer to sunrise. Just because some drivers are not the best at watching for runners. And it kind of depends. Sometimes in winter, if it's like super snowstorming outside, I will use the treadmill that I have. So then that can vary as well.
So maybe, and also for like my fellow listeners here, like we're kind of also emphasizing, like in the pod, like the listeners, like to be like remote work, digital nomad, have more freedom, to be being able to maybe be more outdoors, to being able to do more runs, right? So as I hear, running is kind of one of your passions, right? Is that correct? So maybe I don't exactly know where you live, so maybe it sounds like a beautiful place, but maybe you can paint us a picture of how it looks where you live and when you go for your trail runs.
Yeah, so it's very green, many trees, not as many pine trees, more like maples and stuff like that. There are 13 lakes within an hour's driving distance of me, 13 very large lakes. I'm sorry, I'm going to go into feet here because I don't know it in kilometers.
Feet.
But the lake that I live closest to is 600 feet deep at its deepest point.
Okay.
So very deep, very large. It's 100 miles to go around it on a bike. As I've had friends do that, I should do it at some point. But very large lakes that we have. Some of them are smaller, but mine's very large. And just all this water, all this nature. I'll go out on these trails. And there's waterfalls along the trails. And
nice.
It's just that group of water and nature. I think because I've lived here so long, it's hard to describe, but it's a lot of hills, a lot of waterfalls, bodies of water, rivers, lakes.
Sounds beautiful.
You're always seeing some of it,
And what's the region called in the US? Like which state?
It's the Finger Lakes region.
Finger Lakes region.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the state? Like it's in
New York.
New York. Okay. So I just checked. So I mean, many listeners listening to this podcast, they're not in Sweden, so you might be anywhere, like in India or Hong Kong or US, whatever. So I have lots of connections all over the place. But still, like 600 feet, that's 182 meters. So that's pretty deep. You know, like the closest lake I have is to, like, distance-wise, might be 3 miles or something, 4 miles. 5 kilometers, perhaps. It's not that deep, like 60 feet.
Maybe. Yeah. Some of the other ones are a lot less deep, but their history is they were carved out by the glaciers thousands of years ago. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, okay, sounds great. You know, and maybe so I know you do a podcast because I've been in the podcast, and you do health coaching. Do you do anything else that is your main things, or?
They are pretty much my main things. I am right now, especially given COVID happened and it's just kind of changed the dynamic of everything. I work at a winery as well, but I'm also working to start teaching fitness classes and offering services at the wineries. Obviously I wouldn't really be doing one-on-one coaching at a winery, but offering those fitness classes with like wine tastings and different things like that, as my end goal is to be able to own my own winery / fitness studio right on one of the lakes.
So please share how that would look like. Like I see winery and fitness sounds like two good things, but how do you kind of combine them? How would that work?
It would just, obviously they'd still have a little bit of separation in the fact that you're not going to be drinking at the same time that you're working out. But I find that there's a ton of similarities in the two. One, for me, both connect me to nature. I work at a very, very tiny winery. So
nice.
Being an assistant, helping out there, I basically was part of every job. They'd call me, tell me I needed to show up to do this job, and I'd be there and doing it. But I'd be like tending the vines and doing all the hard farm work, or I'd be helping make the wine. And all of that is extremely physical.
Yeah.
People, sitting there, you drinking your bottle and you're like, oh, I'm just relaxing, when I'm scooping probably 100-kilogram piles of crushed grapes into the bed of the tractor and driving it down the road and moving stuff. And so there's just a huge physical, but also I think the winery I was at had a beautiful view over the lake. So again, being connected to all of the nature while I was out there just made me feel completely complete. And so I want to help people connect to that.
That sounds awesome. And I do appreciate wine. I'm not sure if I'm like a wine person, like a wine guy, but maybe I'm half Spanish as well. So, you know, we have a house in Spain, and like the wine is, yeah. I would, you know, totally prefer it. So, so would you be able, like, if you do like the fitness and wine thing, would you be able to drink wine while you do the fitness thing, or that's illegal?
Usually do the fitness thing first and then do the wine.
Yeah.
I don't know how safe it is to do it the other way. I do know some people who will offer classes, fitness at wineries, and they'll be drinking as they do yoga.
Really? Okay.
But I don't know how my balance would be impacted by that.
Yeah. I can share though. It happened a few times when I go for a really long, run, like a half marathon or longer, and then I get back home. Maybe it's like Saturday, I feel like super relaxed, and you know, it's like weekend and so on, and then I'm gonna have a glass of wine, you know, rather than maybe what you would think would be, you know, more appropriate, like glass of water, for instance. So that has happened. But I'm also kind of, so you're running, your favorite distance is like 10 miles, right? But you do longer ones as well, like the marathon. You aim for the Boston. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do really enjoy the marathon as well. It's just often right now with just doing other things, it's having to manage my time.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not my priority to go farther. Like, I'd love to run an ultra, but I do know I need the time to train for it properly. And so making sure I balance that between doing any other projects I'm doing.
Okay. So also I'm very curious, because I know you're building your business, right? And your brand, and you have the podcast and the winery, and, you know, coaching and everything. Like, share your like business journey a bit, like your main challenges perhaps, or like your main insights when actually building the business. You know, like when I began, I was thinking, I'm a primal health coach, I can have a business. I did not realize you need to build the business itself, you know, with marketing and those things. It caught me by surprise, right?
Yeah, I was definitely the same way. So when I found Primal and all of that, I was still in college. I was actually going for a pharmacy degree, surprisingly, and was so in awe of what I was learning from Mark Siston's blogs and all of that, that I'm like, there has to be a way other than just telling people about this that I can help them. And that's when I found Primal Health Coach and was like, okay, now I have a credibility body so that I am not just talking to people. They actually know I do know something. Started that while I was in school, and was like, now I can't stay as a pharmacy student anymore, because it doesn't align with what I'm learning, what I'm teaching, what I believe in. But I was also like, this is the answer to my prayers, because I can leave pharmacy school and go become a coach. Not as simple maybe as I'd like to think. But that's okay. Especially being who I am, anyone will tell you that it's not that I'm very multi-passionate. Obviously, as you can see, between fitness, coaching, and wine, it shows that there's some variation. And so for me to come up with like my niche or who I want to work with is such a hard task. I bounced around till about this summer.
Okay.
Still obviously finding clients along the way, but not having that succinct message to be more clear on what I was doing. And it's still shifted and refined, but it was one of those that I was like, why can't I come up with this? And why is my marketing not working? And one, I've learned that while maybe working with people in their 20s and college students can be a little bit more difficult, because some are financially not as well equipped, especially in the US, where they come out of college with a lot of debt. It was something when I was in college that I was constantly seeing them obviously not take care of their health. Their school came first in their mind, but they put their health on the back burner. And I did the opposite and put my health first, and my school benefited. So it was just one of those that I'm like, they're coming into school healthy, and they're coming out extremely unhealthy. They're coming out 20, 30 pounds heavier. You're just like, I don't know if you can fully see inflammation on someone, but they're so puffy and puffed out that I'm like, there has to be a lot of inflammation and stress. And I'm like, at least in the US, with all the health problems that develop due to stress and poor health choices, I'm like, if you could stop it in college, you could probably stop so many of these conditions that develop around age 35, 40. Hence why I'm writing my book.
Yeah. And I'm kind of two thoughts. Like, one is that avatar, that target audience sounds like it's a good, you know, you have a purpose and you have a why, but I'm also kind of curious, how come you picked, you know, that target audience? Because there could be like when I began, I kind of was thinking people in the 30s doing ultra running, you know, but they did not end up being my kind of avatar. Instead, my avatar target audience became like the 45 to 55, and they have like aches and pains, and they want to get back to how they felt like when they were a bit younger, right? So I was kind of, you know, trying to find my target audience, which I kind of found eventually. So that's one thing. And also about your book. So I would like to hear about the book, of course, as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like my question, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, while I completely get what you're saying, and I actually love to work with like the 65 and older community as well, which obviously stretches my niche to very differing ends. But I love helping them, again, as you're saying, feel younger, be able to, having a personal training background as well, help them do their basic tasks of sitting down, carrying their groceries into the house, or whatever those things may be. But also right now, knowing that we're very restricted, at least in the United States, on what we can and can't do, and who chooses to come out, or how we can socialize. They're a harder market to reach on the internet.
Yeah.
I meet all of them if I'm at the gym and they're swimming in the therapy pool, usually. But not that that's a bad thing, just it limits that. And again, I'm just love working with that group, but I'm also seeing how if you work with the younger population, you can prevent many of the problems that older population is now dealing with.
Yeah, I totally agree, you know, and I also work with test-based nutrition and all, you know, and we have this like health crisis basically, right? So we can do an impact, and we have to make a change somewhere, you know, along the line, and the earlier the better, of course. I'm also thinking like your book. What's the title of your book?
So it's the Freshman 15.
Yeah.
You probably don't know the concept. I did actually talk to someone about it who's in Denmark, and she had never heard of the Freshman 15.
I have no idea.
It's a very American thing.
Yeah.
And maybe a little Canadian will understand it too. But basically, college students are known that their first year, their freshman year, gain 15 pounds or more.
Okay.
Is just the customary from stress, overeating, eating junk food, drinking too much. It's kind of just that term for gaining some weight in college is the freshman 15.
Oh, okay.
So it's just that I kind of used a catchy, everyone in the US knows it term to kind of grab attention. Don't get me wrong, some places, there was one college I toured at one point and they're like, no, it's not the freshman 15 here, it's the freshman 40. But it's common for college students to gain a lot of weight, especially within their freshman year due to the transition and just kind of increased freedom.
Okay, cool. And I'm thinking as well, you know, because it's okay. So you find your niche, you're experimenting, you are building it, you're into running, and like, how did you, why, like, and you have a podcast, like I'm wondering, like, a first question then, like, what are you thinking, like, for marketing, what are you doing for marketing, like how do you make your brand visible so people can actually find you, Margaret?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of promoting myself on Instagram, promoting myself through the podcast, obviously promoting both of the other things on both platforms. I'm going to be varying my marketing a little bit more. I do have a YouTube channel that will be starting as I've been ramping up the podcast more, and we'll be sharing the episodes there. I plan to change some of my marketing and really play with using some different platforms, maybe some Pinterest, as I know a lot of people are on there, and I don't get a lot of engagement from Facebook, just not my population's market. But for me, my key place is actually just kind of networking with other individuals and then meeting people from that. Social media has never been my thing.
No.
Never. I mean, I have it, I use it, but I've never been the person to get engagement from it and get a lot of interest on my pieces, my promotions, nothing. So it's been almost disheartening in that way. But for me, I have the skill of I can basically meet someone and make connections with them in about 5 minutes, very easily. I did that at the winery all summer.
Yeah.
And so funny story of how I got working there. I met the owners at the gym. They swim there. They're in their 70s. They swim there almost every day. And I knew one of their past employees, and he introduced us. And then they, 6 months later, emailed me that they needed help.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure, because they were like, no experience needed. And yeah, so I started working in the tasting room as the start. And I'm just one of those that I came in, people will come into the tasting room. I immediately greet them, start to connect with them, make it very much that tasting a personal experience.
Yeah.
And just have realized that that's where my talent lies. I mean, I've always been the person working at the gym that connects with the individuals there. And they know who I am. We talk every day, you know, that kind of thing. So that's where my strength lies. So that's why I really network with other businesses or something like that, and then connect with clientele from there.
Okay, so I'm curious then, and also for the listener or viewer, if you're watching on YouTube, so that's one of your strengths, like the networking, like the offline thing going on, right? So for someone that is listening, because many people listening to the podcast are kind of entrepreneurs, they are kind of maybe just at the beginning of the journey, or they started the business, kind of, you know, or in something in between. And they would like to meet people kind of offline as well. Maybe they're not big on social media yet. Like, do you have any like top advice or something, like how they can actually do that?
Yeah. So obviously building a pitch to, especially if you're cold messaging or cold emailing or contacting of an individual, but having that pitch, knowing what you are offering, how it can benefit them. So like me teaching fitness classes at wineries, I talk about how it basically puts that winery on the map as a health-focused winery, along with getting them in front of different audiences and attracting different clientele, among many other things. But for me, I very much think about, okay, well, who do I want to work with? Or what kind of group do I want to work with? How am I going to contact them? How am I going to pitch to them? And pretty much email and work from there. And know that obviously many might not respond, but if I'm responding to or emailing a large number of people, I'm likely to get some responses and then build from there.
Okay.
With the book, I know that my market is obviously college students. So I am contacting college, like different departments in colleges, to see if I can speak to their audiences, as well as it's not as common everywhere else, but in the United States, we have Greek life, and Greek life organizations are always looking for speakers.
Greek life.
So, yes. So like sororities and fraternities.
Never heard of Greek life. I don't think we're Greek life in Sweden.
Nope, probably not.
But I think that sounds awesome. Like a solid, consistent approach. Like find the groups or the people you want to interact with and do business with, and find them, approach them, and take it from there. Like that sounds like a very conscious approach rather than just happen to meet someone. You know, you have like a focus when you go for it. So that's an immense, massive advice to the listener here as well. And I'm also thinking, because my first thoughts of what stood out with what you are doing is your podcast. And I checked your podcast. I think you have like 60 plus episodes. There might be other, like, I'm not sure, like there are like the Primal, there was the Primal Blueprint podcast, and there are kind of a few others as well, but not that many, And you've been at it for a while, like 60 plus episodes. That's quite something. So that's as I see it, like a digital tool in order to create something. So like, why did you do the podcast? Like, why podcasts, and what do you kind of want to achieve with podcasts?
Yeah, it had a mix of reasons. One, I really enjoyed listening to Paleo Magazine's podcast, which then has switched names and ownership. And I still enjoy it, but for the fact that they bring on guests all the time. And I love to connect with people, as I've been saying, but also I was like, it's very cool to learn from a number of different people and almost maybe not feel like you're an expert in that area, but now you've got to step up because they provided you some wisdom in that area.
Yeah.
So, or at least then you know how to turn or how to pivot or who to send someone to if you got a client with issues such as that. But it was one of those things that when COVID hit, I know you guys didn't really shut down as much or at all, but we complete shutdown. The only thing that was open for me were grocery stores.
Yeah.
And all my social connections and activities kind of fell to the wayside for the fact that there was a lot of fear here.
Yeah.
I maybe didn't have as much fear, but a lot of people were very fearful, and to each their own on that fear. But I was like, how do I continue to connect with people? And I was always that person who was like, oh, it would be really cool to have a podcast. So the desire for connection with people, along with my desire to eventually create a podcast, is where that kind of got born from.
Yeah.
And being able to then find guests, bring them on, interact with people, and yeah.
Can you maybe you can relate? Like, I think like I've been on social media, Instagram, and even like I visited TikTok, right? And Facebook, and I spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, but I find that it's kind of a difficult platforms, and I had periods where I listen a lot to podcasts, and I like the format of it. It's very intimate, right? Like it's maybe it's like Mark Sisson from the Primal Blueprint straight into my ears.
Yep.
It's like Mark is talking with me rather than more of a generic message on Facebook, and everyone can read it, and it's kind of you scroll through, and it's more of an intimate, direct thing, right?
Absolutely. And I think I really resonated with podcasting for the fact that being a college student, I commuted to college for the second 2 years.
Yeah.
So I was driving, it was a 20-minute commute, 20 to 30 minutes one way. So I was driving about an hour every day in the car, but I can put on a podcast and listen. I can't be scrolling through social media as I'm driving. And was learning a lot more through a podcast than I learn on any post, and being able to then maybe find those people later and follow them, but was still feeling like I got a lot more information than what I'd get off of regular social media and just scrolling.
So do you have like in your business and winery thing, do you have like a goal with the podcast itself, or like, what's the goal with the podcast?
Right now, it's very much just to continue slowly growing. Especially I recently moved it to a different host. It was just on a host that was not really helping it grow. It was actually dropping its engagement. Okay. While obviously some drop in engagement happens from time to time, or plateau can happen, I truly felt, because of doing my research and it being common on that platform for this to happen, that it was the platform itself. So I've moved it. It's continuing now to grow and continue to grow, continue to make connections. I am starting to bring on guests in the wine industry to diversify, because I predominantly started this as a health podcast and recently positioned it to have some wine guests as well. So doing that, adding sponsors to episodes or affiliates to different episodes to promote is really where my goal for it is, and to be able to reach a larger audience. I haven't clearly defined my goals for the podcast as I'm seeing how it's been on this new platform for about a month. So I'm still analyzing and kind of looking at how it's doing and wanting to build up from there.
Okay, but you ahead of me. I mean, this one, I do have a Swedish one, like Live Your Dream Life, and then that one we've been doing like for a year and a half, right? We're like on episode 50 plus something. But this one, the Digital Freedom Coach, that's pretty new. So I'm kind of experimenting. So I understand like your thoughts about, you know, finding guests and how to develop it and where to take it, right? And I'm also thinking like in order to, when you use like the podcast as a digital tool and everything, like what's your end goal? I mean, this is also the podcast, like the Digital Freedom Coach. Like, so what I kind of, the message I want to send to like the listeners, so if they're watching on YouTube, is you can do whatever you want, right?
Absolutely.
It's only a mindset thing, you know, and you can use digital tools, and that could be, you know, can be anything really, like for marketing on LinkedIn to setting up a podcast or something. But what are your, like, two things, like what's your kind of end goal, Margaret? What do you want to achieve, like freedom? I think that's the main question, like freedom wise, right?
Yeah, freedom wise, I'm looking to create my own personal career doing what I love, which is the wine, fitness, and health, obviously promoting it through the podcast and things like that, but being able to, even if I do have my own winery, be able to have that freedom that if I want to go travel to Europe for a little while, I can. Just have the finances to do anything I want and not have to stress about money. Being a college student, just being the financial situation my parents were in while I was growing up was not necessarily always great. And we didn't always know where our finances would be. So having a career that one I can build, I can control, I know will be sustainable, but also won't change based off someone else's choices, is something that's important to me, because I've also spent the last 6 years working at a gym. I still do it because I enjoy doing it. But I only do it part-time. But also, like, knowing that I have no control over my income, or at any point the classes I teach, like with what happened with COVID, can be taken away. And I still have not been able to teach classes at that gym yet, nor do I have control of how much I make teaching a class there. And when you're teaching them at a gym, at least in the United States, it's known as a labor of love, because you really don't get paid to teach classes. So it's just one of those things that I've experienced different things and learned a lot along the way, and just know that I want to have something that I can sustain in the long run and still enjoy my life and not be working and stressed.
So if I say like the two words digital nomad, what would that mean to you?
That would probably mean me traveling around the world, visiting different wineries and doing events with them.
Sounds awesome. That sounds awesome.
Way too much time in the south of France, but
I have business partners and colleagues and friends in south of France. We can set something up. Actually, they have like golf. They don't have golf courses, but they have golf courses next to them, and there's lots of wineries around that area. I'm pretty sure. You know, we can set up. You know. So that's, you know, and also for the listener and the viewer, you know, because I'm encouraging you as well to believe in yourself, right? I think that's very important, and to, you know, step by step to explore like your passion and your talents, and where do you want to go, and what do you want to build, and like what do you want to achieve, right? That's kind of the end goal and everything. So I also have at least one more question, and that's kind of, okay, so Margaret, Steffie, like, what do you do? Because in this podcast, we are both health coaches, and maybe you kind of mentioned it already, but I see health as a key. It's fundamental for all business owners, you know, entrepreneurs, people that want to build something and be productive. It's not something you can kind of put on the wayside. I think, like, you know, next to something and then you just pass it by. It's something you need to you know, uphold and carefully examine, right? So what do you do like daily in order to be productive and like have an optimal health in order to be able to like boost your business and everything?
I have maybe some, especially since everything switched and I don't have as much of a structured routine where I used to maybe have to go to college classes and would structure building my business around when I had class and going out and, you know, being at school and planning that way. It's been a little more difficult because I love to work at a coffee shop. That is my favorite place to work. But no coffee shops right now have seating, and it's also the middle of winter. Yeah. They sometimes will now, because they don't have indoor seating because of COVID, they'll have it in the summer. Hopefully it'll all also return to normal sooner rather than later. But for me, it's definitely building time into my day to work out every day or do something physical that benefits my body. I usually put it in at some point. It's not always consistent in the winter or based off, like if I have a interview at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
All good. But having that time, making time in my day to do things I enjoy or finding that balance to do those things. It's hard, and making sure I'm sleeping, and also just being very aware. Like, I'm someone who will work myself into the ground. I am always going. Mm-hmm. Anyone will say that. And it's to my benefit and my fault, because I will often burn myself out very quickly. Or one of my problems lately is I've been putting on a little weight, and I'm like, why is that the case? Because my diet has not changed. And then I'm like, wait, it's probably because I'm doing more than I should be. I'm a little burnt out, so my body's just holding on to a little bit more. And so for me, that key to productivity is just the awareness, as well as actually planning things into my week or having desires, because otherwise I won't get things done, but also listening to what my body wants and what I want to do within a day as well.
Yeah. I mean, and that's good value there. I can relate, you know. I start to realize I'm similar, you know. I start to build something and work with something, and then I almost needs to be pulled out of it, you know. Otherwise, I have to keep at it. So that's it's a good thing if I'm doing like an endurance event, maybe like an ultra run. Yeah. But it's not the best thing if I'm in front of the computer too much, too late, you know, too many hours. And you mentioned earlier that you have like a productivity tool, sort of. You mentioned lists. Can you share a bit about how you work with lists? I
usually have multiple running lists at one time. It is a very, very confusing system for most people, but it makes complete sense to me. Some people have asked me to explain it, and I can't always. I usually have a daily list. I have always held a daily list, or just my agenda, and then I'll usually block in the rough times that I want to do those things. But the night before, maybe we'll be like, okay, I completed X, Y, and Z today, so here's what I'm going to do tomorrow, based off maybe my weekly list. Or when I was in school, would have a running list of all the things I had to do for the semester. Yeah. But also had it broken down in a way that I'm like, okay, this week I'm going to do these things. So very much creating a list. But one of the tools that I've taken from another coach is she doesn't agree with having lists, which completely goes against my mind. Yeah. But how she looks at it is it important? And if you have to do you have to do it soon? Like, do you have to do it today because of a deadline? If so, that's something I then usually put on my list or build time into to do things. So I always have those lists. I also have a list that I keep in a book that I update every week or rewrite it to remind myself. And it's a list of my desires and goals. Okay. Some of them are sometimes little things like finish this course or finish my semester, or small things that happen anyway. And then below that list, this year I've started adding with the date everything I've completed. Both off that list or other small things like, oh, I read a book. Here's the date I finished that book. Yeah. To remind myself that I'm still being productive, even if some days I maybe have off days and I'm like, I'm not a productive person. To then look back at and remind myself that no, I am productive. I'm still completing things. Sure. It's taking maybe longer than my mind thinks it should. Yeah, I think that's good advice as well, you know. And then also for the listener, you're like a productivity tool to keep accountable and also to feel satisfied, I imagine. You know, like you check the list afterwards, you feel like, okay, I've done this, this, and this, and this. I've done something, you know. Maybe I had low energy day, but I have my list and I checked it off a few things. So I'm doing something, and then I can take maybe the rest of the time and balance and recover and everything. Maybe I put those things in my list as well, right? And I'm also thinking, so what is your one piece of advice
that you want to impart on the audience?
I don't remember what I wrote for you.
Yeah.
On thing, but one of really just doing what feels right for you, but also keeping open to new opportunities. I used to be the person who had to abide by that list fully, or I'd write the list up the week ahead of time for each day, and then would get to say Monday and be like, I really do not feel like doing these activities today. Just not where my mindset is at. And often now I'm allowing myself to say shift those to a different day, but take on activities, say from that Thursday that I had planned to work on or something to that extent. So that has really been helpful to me. But also, again, keeping that open mind. When I went into college, I had been drilled into believing I wanted to go into that career since I was 12. So at 18, 6 years of being told I should be a pharmacist, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I agreed. But with that and being my, in a way, type A perfectionist self, kind of had created my next 10 years in a plan of what I'd be doing when. And while it's good to have desires and plans for the future, I've learned, at least for myself, that I need to be a little more open. And when that happens, I have better results and usually have more amazing experiences that I wouldn't think I'd originally have.
Awesome. So stay open to new opportunities, right? So I think that's perfect, you know. And then like to kind of finish, you know, the podcast and everything off here. So like the people listening to the podcast, maybe they would like to get in touch with you, Margaret. Maybe they're into running or wine. Maybe they kind of into wine. Maybe or we have someone listening in France or Spain, whatever, and they kind of you know, Margaret, I think we can do something here. I can sense a business opportunity. You know, how did they get hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. My best place is either on Instagram at grapesandgains_, or at my email, margaret@grapesandgains.com. And I mean, I might be working with someone in France coming up because he was complaining about how the only wine he can get without paying $200 for shipping is French wine right now.
There you go.
So he needs a better way to get other countries' wine because he likes Portuguese wine.
I like Spanish wine, but French wine and, you know, Portuguese wine.
I mean, wine is good, but the winery I work at makes French style wine, so that's what I'm stuck on.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Margaret, for you know, being a guest at the Digital Freedom podcast here today. And I will add like your contact details in the show notes, like on the YouTube and in the podcast, you know, wherever it is, everywhere, like Apple Podcast and so on. So also for you, my dear listener, I hope you got value today. I got value today. And, you know, we shared lots of info and, you know, it was a very exciting episode. I think I got lots of value. So take care, talk soon, and listen to the podcast and the following podcast episodes. So thank you for today. Be awesome, be bold, be courageous, stay positive. Talk soon. Bye-bye.